Donald. In a week where Detroit's emergency manager is meeting with creditors to hopefully set the path for the city's financial recovery, a recovery that, if all goes well, will be turned over to the next mayor to guide, the race for the future of the city's leadership has taken a dramatic twist. One of the frontrunners could be out. A Wayne County Circuit Court judge ruled that Mike Duggan didn't live in the city for a full year before he filed to run for mayor last April and should be off the ballot. Duggan's camp says he had lived in the city a year by the filing deadline in May. Small details that may make a big difference. We will start there tonight, and here to talk about it all are MiWeek contributors Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Guys, how are you this week?
Doing well.
So interesting. Stephen, when we've talked about the entire mayoral race, you keep bringing up, well, what if things change? What if the ballot looks drastically different by the primary? And there you go.
There you go. I don't write stuff without knowing what I'm talking about. Yeah, no, I said last month that I wanted Dave Bing in the mix for this election because one of the things I was worried about was whether the field, as it's configured now, would be the field that we'd see on August 6th when we go vote. As of right now, it won't be. You have a major candidate, probably the second or leading candidate in the field off the ballot. And if that stands, I think it's a much weaker field. I think there are not a lot of great choices at all. There weren't a lot of great choices to begin with, but this is one fewer. Dave Bing may be one of the people sitting around going, you know what, I probably should have put my hat in there. Just as a contingency.
All right, so but Mike Duggan plans to appeal this.
He plans to appeal, and he'll very likely win. I doubt the appellate court will interpret election law as being a gotcha game. Election law exists to help make the process fairer and to facilitate democracy, not to disqualify candidates on the basis of technicalities and narrow readings of the law. The Charter Commission members say their intent was the filing deadline. Of course, this charter is such a mess, there is no rationality to it. But I would say that this is just another little bump, a nuisance, and the appeals court will put him back on the ballot, as they should. The rule says, you know, a year and a day after you register to vote, you have to, you can't file before that. He interpreted that as meaning a filing deadline. That's why he registered to vote in Detroit when he did. And I think the appeals court will interpret it as filing deadline. You're not going to punish somebody for being efficient.
All right, before we talk about what this does to Mike Duggan's campaign, even if he is put back on the ballot, Nolan says the charter's a mess. Is the Detroit charter
The charter's a mess, and one of the interesting things out of the opinion from the judge yesterday is that she said this phrase was unambiguous and clear, which I think is the last thing anybody would say about almost anything in the charter. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could interpret the things in that chart. In fact, one of the ways you could interpret the very section she's looking at is that anybody who's lived in the city for more than a year would also be disqualified, because it says will have lived in the city for 1 year. It doesn't say for at least 1 year. So I mean, I think you can pretty much tie yourself up in legal knots by reading things as literally as she has, and I don't think that's what the appellate courts will do. I think she's looking at the text and saying that the legislative history doesn't matter because the text is clear. I don't think it's as clear as she does, and I don't think the appellate court will either.
Yeah, but if you're Mike Duggan, you're looking at it, she's like, oh man, I can't believe that this actually got to this point. Even if he does get himself back on the ballot, Nolan, does this damage his campaign?
No, I don't think so. I think it'll be a temporary blip. Look who filed this. This was filed by Tom Barrow, a long shot candidate, doesn't have a chance in the world of prevailing in the primary, whether Duggan's on or not. And Robert Davis, a serial lawsuit filer, funded by the unions, whose sole aim is to continue the chaos in Detroit. And I think voters will see through that. I doubt Duggan loses any support because of this issue.
I think it could hurt him. I think it plays into his weakest trait, which is the idea that somehow he's a carpetbagger, moved into the city at the last minute to try to take over. There are a lot of people who push that narrative, who now will have at least one court opinion to back that argument up. And if he fights to get himself back on the ballot, what they'll say is, see how desperately he wants to take over. See how desperately outsiders want to run Detroit.
I think people see this as a fairness. Remember, these people who filed the lawsuit are the same ones who are squealing the loudest about the loss of democracy and voter suppression, and that's what this is. This is cheating Detroiters of a democratic choice, and it certainly is vote suppression.
I want to get back to the point that you made in the beginning of the conversation about Mayor Dave Bing, and if he knew that Mike Duggan perhaps would not be on the ballot, do you think that would have changed his mind at all?
I don't know. I mean, I do think that ultimately the mayor's decision was very personal. That, you know, he's 70 years old. This 4 years has taken a real toll on him. I think they also looked at their internal numbers for his support, which, you know, Duggan or no Duggan were not great. But I also think that if you're sitting in that chair now trying to manage the city or trying to help with the emergency management, you see Duggan exit the race, it will give him a second thought, I think, about whether he should have put his hat in, and what city, who is he going to leave? Who's he leaving this city to is going to be one of the questions that'll start gnawing at him.
Of course, Nolan is frantically shaking his head no over here. He just keeps nodding no.
I don't think it would have changed the mayor's decision at all. I think he was done with it. And he dreaded the idea of a grueling, bitter race. That was going to be the case whether Mike Duggan was in it or not. I think he had taken this thing as far as he was prepared to take it and is more than comfortable with his decision to get out. And again, Mike Duggan's out today. He's not going to be out when this thing
may
hits
not
this,
be out.
Yeah, he may not be
appeals
out.
court.
So what is the actual path now? He appeals.
I think you appeal. Well, I'm not sure if he can emergency appeal to the Supreme Court, which I would imagine you can, because this is something that's got to be settled pretty quickly. You don't have time to go through the appeals court and then to the Supreme Court. But I would imagine that this will get done, I would say, inside a week and a half, because
So they can firm up the ballot, yeah, by the
time is
timing.
frittering away when he should be campaigning.
And
Well, you
he's
know
going
what?
to continue to campaign.
No one ever said it was dull, that Detroit politics were dull, right? Of
Although
course,
this
it
kind of stuff,
has
I
to
mean,
be something.
it's a little banana republic, some of this stuff. I mean, I get tired of the constant, second guessing. Nothing is ever final. You can always keep arguing your point even after you've lost. We got to get to the point where we're not doing that all the time.
All right, and it's going to play out over the next couple of days.